Okay, so the second parallel passage after my brief interlude there is Mark 8, 1 through 10. We're still talking about Jesus feeding a great multitude. So if somebody would read that either from the board or...
I'll read it.
Okay.
From the NIV.
All right.
Jesus feeds the 4,000. During those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way, because some of them have come a long distance. His disciples answered, but where in this remote place can anyone get enough bread to feed them? How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. When he had taken the 7 loaves and given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And they did so. They had a few small fish as well. He gave thanks for them also and told the disciples to distribute them. The people ate and were satisfied. After the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over, about 4,000 men were present. Having sent them away, he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the region of, I don't know what that is.
That's Dalmanutha.
Yeah, there you go.
Dalmanutha. Okay.
The Pharisees came and...
Wait, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all for that one. What I haven't said yet, and it may be obvious, I don't know, every time they talk about a volume of men, a quantity of men, 4,000, 5,000, whatever they happen to be, sometimes they say, and women and children, sometimes they don't say it, but the presumption is always, when they're in a large group environment like that, that's exactly what that means. So for every man there, there's probably, not for every man there, but for many of the men that are there, there's a woman. And that woman may have anywhere from 1 to however many kids. And so it's way more than just the 5,000. It's 5,000 plus the whole families of any of those folks that are there.
That's like 25,000.
Pardon me?
That's like 25,000.
Could be. Yeah, and we don't know. And we don't really need to speculate too much on that, except to know that usually when they make that reference to men in a large group environment, in a group situation, it usually includes family as well. So, this is for us too today. I mean, just the title alone, this is for us here today, right now. Except for the dog out there. An evil generation is given the sign of the prophet Jonah. Again, 2 parallel passages, Matthew and Mark. If somebody would read the Matthew 16, 1 through 12 passage.
NASB. The Pharisees and
Sadducees
came up and testing Jesus. They asked him to show them a sign from heaven. But he replied to them, when it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning there will be a storm today, for the sky is red and threatening. Do you know how to discern the appearance of the sky, but cannot discern the signs of night? An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and a sign will not be given except the sign of Jonah, when he left them and went away. And the disciples came to the other side of the sea, but they had forgotten to bring any bread. And Jesus said to them, watch out and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and
Sadducees.
But they began to discuss this among themselves, saying, he has said this because we did not bring any bread. But Jesus, aware of this, said, you men of little faith, why do you discuss among yourselves that you have no bread? Do you not yet understand or remember the 5 loaves and 5,000 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets full you picked up? Or the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many large baskets full you picked up? How is it that you do not understand that I did not speak to you? I did not speak to you concerning bread, but beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees.
Yes.
And they understood that he did not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My mistake. Go ahead.
That he did not say to be aware of the leaven of bread, but the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees.
A good way to remember that word, Sadducees, there's a little ditty, I don't remember whether it's a joke or a saying or what it is, but the Sadducees don't believe in heaven. They don't believe in an afterlife. And so they're sad, you see, because there is no heaven. You know, that's one of my earliest lessons that I remember, so I've been able to say Sadducees without any problem. I think it was Pastor Sharon Nolan that told me that at the first congregation that I ever attended willingly. You know.
I don't think anybody else was too smart to get that.
Say again, please.
I don't think anyone else was too smart to get that.
Okay. Now the Mark passage, the 11 through 21.
Page And the Pharisees came forth and began to question with him, seeking of him a sign from heaven, tempting him. And he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, Why doth that generation seek after a sign? Verily I say unto you, there shall no sign be given unto this generation. And he left them, and entering into the ship again departed to the other side. Now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, neither had they in the ship with them more than 1 loaf. And he charged them, saying, Take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, It is because we have no bread. And when Jesus knew it, he saith unto them, Why reason ye, because ye have no bread? Perceive ye not yet, neither understand? Have ye your heart yet hardened? Having eyes, see ye not? Having ears, hear ye not? And do ye not remember, when I brake the 5 loaves among 5,000, how many baskets full of fragments took ye up? They say unto him, 12. And when the 7 among 4,000, how many baskets full of fragments took ye up? And they say, 7. And he said unto them, How is it that ye do not understand?
Okay. So obviously there's quite a bit of an agreement between the two gospel writers about that particular session, if you will. 76 here is a blind man healed at. Now this word, you could say, most people say Bethsaida. If I were reading that in the Greek, I would call that Bethsaida. But I'm not going to get hung up on whether you say Bethsaida or Bethsaida. But no.
Kind of like how you spell it. Kind of how like you say Mount Sinai. Is that how you kind of pronounce that?
Mount Sinai? Yeah, and most of the time it's really supposed to be pronounced more like Mount Sinai, but you know that's Hebrew, so I don't profess to have any kind of knowledge about Hebrew except a smattering. Greek a bit, you know. I went to school a lot for it, about 6 or 7 different classes, different levels, but I do not consider myself a scholar there either, but definitely an avid student. So, a blind man healed at Bethsaida, Mark 8:22 through 26. Have a reader?
And I'll read off the board.
Okay.
And he comes beside me, and he said to me, Bring a blind man unto him, and Bars.
Besought
him and touch him.
Mm-hmm.
And he took a blind man by the hand and led him and out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands upon him, he asked him if he saw outright. And he looked up and said, I see a man as trees walking. After that, he put his hands again upon his eyes, and made him look up, and he was restored, and he saw every man clearly, and he sat him away to his house, saying, neither go into the town nor tell it to any in the town.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, moving on to point 77 here. Peter identifies Jesus as the Christ. And that's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. If someone besides the dog would like to read Matthew 16, 13 through 20.
When Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea.
You can say that a couple different ways. Most people say Caesarea Philippi, but it's probably more like Caesarea Philippi. Philippi, actually.
Philippi? Okay.
Yeah.
He asked the disciples, saying, whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And they said, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some say Elias, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. He said unto them, but whom say ye that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered and said unto him, blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then charged he his disciples that they should tell no man that he was Jesus the Christ.
Okay, just a little point perhaps of interest. When you see that word, that name Bar-Jonah, yeah, in the Hebrew, whenever you see B-A-R before a person's name, that literally means son of. So this would be son of Jonah. But which Jonah? You know, Jonah is like John, George, you know. Yeah. Yeah, the Bar means son of. You know, there was a character called Bar Jesus, Bar Jesus, and it means son of Jesus. But Jesus could be Josiah, it could be Joshua, it could be a few different names. In fact, I have two grandsons. One's named Joshua, and the other one's named Josiah. And they're both kind of variations of that. Yeah. I'm going to teach them how to get into discussions with each other about that when they're older. The 7-year-old's ready to handle it, but the 5-month-old, not yet. Okay. Mark 8:27 through 30.
And Jesus went out and his disciples into the towns of Caesarea.
If you want, yes.
Philippi. And by the way, he asked his disciples, saying unto them, whom do men say that I am? And they answered, John the Baptist, but some say Elias, and others one of the prophets. And he said unto them, but whom say ye that I am? And Peter answered and said unto him, thou art the Christ. And he charged them that they should tell no man of him.
Okay, and then the other third parallel passage, Luke 9:18 through 21.
And it came to pass as he was alone praying, his disciples were with him. And he asked them, saying, who say the people that I am? They answering said, John the Baptist, but some say Elias, and others say that one of the old prophets is risen. He said unto them, but whom say ye that I am? Peter answering said, the Christ of God. And he straightly charged them, and commanded them to tell no man that thing.
Okay. So again, those three writers agree on the main context of what those conversations were about. Yes.
We have to go back to Matthew.
Okay.
There we think we're, I guess it's a little bit.
You mean the passage we just read, or further back into Matthew?
I asked you a question, but I was stupid.
Okay.
it's the Canaanite woman.
Okay.
The woman came and knelt before him. Lord, help me, she said. He replied, it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Is that a metaphor? Or what are you calling the Canaanite woman dog?
Yep. Effectively.
What is the dog?
The derivation of her lineage. Yeah, okay, let me try it a different way. Her background. She was Syrophoenician. Syrophoenicians, first of all, were not Jews. They were not Jews. So when he talks about, I have not come to the lost sheep of Israel, he's referring to Syrophoenicians, because they're lost sheep. They could have been Israelites. They could have partaken of the Jewish thing, but they're not. He was reaching the Jews. That was his purpose at that time. Much more and a little bit less and whatever else. I'm not going to go into what his whole purpose was. His whole purpose was that we would be sitting here today with all the multitudes of things that have happened throughout the years. But she wasn't, effectively, she was not a believer, if we were using today's language. She was not a believer. She didn't really believe the Pharisees. She certainly probably didn't even believe in Jesus and whatever else. But she did believe that this man called Jesus, could save her daughter. And so she actually had more faith than the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all the rest of them.
So they would use those terms outside of the Jewish people. They would call them dogs.
Who is this they of whom you speak?
It was Canaanite woman. I just read.
Well, the writer of that passage, yeah. But here's another thing, and I know that Ken has discoursed on this significantly among this group of people that reside here. But when you take a word that we understand it as today, we need to remember that this was like around 2,000 years ago. But it was also around 1611 when the King James translation was first published. And what was the context of what did the King James Version translators think that those words meant? So they wrote it down that way. So it's not like, it isn't necessarily like the dogs out here, but definitely, I would say lower classed people, yeah. In society today, we have people that are ostensibly good. They do the right things, but I think within this room alone, if I ask you to pick one person from outside of anywhere to do with this that was a good person, and then also pick out a bad person, I think we'd probably get into some really animated discussions about the choices that people have made. So what has to happen is you have to be able to see it in the context. In order to be able to do it in the context, you have to be able to go back to in the case of the Hebrew language, what did that particular word dogs mean, and what was he trying to convey there? But what he was trying to convey was very definitely, this is my take on it, and if I'm off, I can be corrected. But my take on it is, you don't even really have anything to do with the Pharisees. You're not any kind of a believer at all. Why should I even do that for you? And she answered him, because I know who you are. But not so much I know who you are, but I know what you can do. And I believe you can save my daughter. And so we don't really have to get into big discussions of who Jesus is so much as we need to get into big discussions about what Jesus' plan is for our individual lives, as well as our collective lives, as well as the entire world as it is now, as it was before Noah's time, and as it's going to be after it's wiped out and started all over again. So we would think that's an insulting terminology. And sure, it is.
Coming from him. Coming from Jesus. You know?
Yeah. But again, the context, he's Jesus, he's God. And frankly, if he were God and he chose one word to describe us, dogs would probably be a pretty good word. Frankly.
Amen.
And that would probably be a kind word. Especially when I see how dogs are treated around here. And other places. I mean, how are dogs treated today? How about that for an analogy? Yeah, hello, yeah. Yeah, they got a little bus that drives around up to your house, and they put your dog in it, and they give him the haircut, him or her the haircut, you know. Yeah. So you don't think that was an insult coming from Jesus, because God cannot insult. But can he rankle us? Can he annoy us? Can he use a variety of trigger words on us? Sure. Why does he do that? Because he wants our hearts.
What if you see it from this point of view, where in Scripture, I don't remember the book or the verse, but God said in Scripture where God will use the selfishness of this world to show the wise, and that's where people understand that it was a miracle. If you see it from where God will use the selfishness of this world to show the wise. I mean,
the guy that I was talking about that's on his way out from life right now. You know, in the society of that time, he would be shunned. He wouldn't be allowed to go in the temple because he's unsaved. He was unsaved. He wouldn't be allowed to purchase property. He would have had no rights. But we as Christians, we receive all the rights of the kingdom by our conversion experience. You know, the family bank account, drawing on all the different stuff, and Dr. Welch has done some fantastic teachings, and I know that those teachings have been heard. I don't know which teacher would have taught on that, but I don't know how many teachers from Channel Islands Bible College teach here, but I know at least 3, 4, 5, maybe even more than that. And so that teaching comes out a lot. We're saved, and Jesus really does want the best for us, but sometimes we need to wrap up alongside the head. We need to have a stand in the gap Christian like Rosa Huerta, go up against her Goliath and her becoming the David, and hitting that rock right in between my forehead there, you know. And she's a hero to me. I would say heroine, but when in this environment, I'm not sure heroine is, you know, but heroine is that word for a female hero, you know. But she's my hero. She is. I'll find her again. Anyway, just send her an email at that old address, whether I get a response or not. It was an old address. It was like, I won't tell you anything more about it, but anyway, I hope she responds somewhere along the way. But if not, I'll keep peppering her name around in Ventura County. Just about every time I get a chance to talk, I'll mention the name of Rosa Huerta. You know, don't know where she might be. She would not even leave for 1 week of training that I worked for Wild Fish and Fowl Life, or Fish and Wildlife Service. My pet name is Wild Fish and Fowl Life, but Fish and Wildlife Service over in Ventura. That's where her and I worked together. And 3 of us had to go to newcomers orientation. Well, our newcomers orientation is in Portland, Oregon, so we have to go up there for a week and get oriented, whatever. Yeah, the government's got money to pay for all of that stuff, so 2 of us went up there. Rosa refused to go. She would not go, and her sole reason for not going is because she did not want to miss even one night of our Bible study. She got a lot of mileage out of me on that one. You know, boy, did I razz the dickens out of her. I was just downright mean. I wasn't just being sarcastic, but I was just being mean. But She won, but I won more. And I'll never forget her. Never forget her. Never will. And I know that she's married. I don't know whether she has kids or not. I won't tell you the story about her marriage because that's not for publication. So let's move on just a little bit more now, if we may. Where are we? Number 78, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Jesus speaks concerning his impending death and resurrection. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Would someone now start with the Matthew 16, 21 through 38 passages?
Maybe. Well, from that time on, Jesus began explaining to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said. This shall never happen to you. Jesus turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. Then Jesus said to his disciples, If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for me will find it. What good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world, yet forfeits his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what he has done. I tell you the truth, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.
Okay, and what version was that?
NIV.
Okay. It sounded like it, but I wasn't sure. Okay. Alrighty, and then someone else, the Mark 8:31 through 9:1.
And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected of the elders, and of the chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he spake that saying openly. And Peter took him and began to rebuke him. But when he had turned about and looked on his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, Get thee behind me, Satan, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but things that be of men. And when he had called the people unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it. But whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Whosoever therefore shall be ashamed of men and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him also shall the Son of Man be ashamed when he cometh in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. And he saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that there be some of them that stand here, which shall not taste of death till they have seen the kingdom of God come with power.
Okay, and then Luke 9:22 through 27.
Then the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be slain, and be raised the third day. And he said to them all, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross daily, and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it. For what is a man advantage?
Yes.
If he gain the whole world and lose himself or be cast away. For whosoever shall be ashamed of me and of my words, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed, when he shall come in his own glory, and in his Father's, and of holy angels. But I tell you of a truth, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death, till they see the kingdom of God. And it came to pass about 8 days after these sayings, he took Peter and John and James.
And there was more.
At the end of
It doesn't look like the end of that he ended. Just end that sentence. Was that the end?
Yeah.
There's no period.
Okay, but there's nothing after the. I mean, oh yeah, you got the same thing I got. Okay. Anybody have a King James handy?
I do. I'll read it out.
Okay, if you could just look at it and see what the rest of that might have said. And while you're doing that, so we were talking about the dogs before, and the potentiality, if you will, that God might have, that Jesus might have insulted her. Boy, did he nail Peter though. You know, now that woman was kind of a private conversation, sort of. I mean, there were people gathered around, but that was Jesus to that woman. This one was like, "Yo, Peter, get with the program," in front of everybody. You know.
That's 27 minutes. So 28 is added on to the syllabus. It's not 22 through 27. But 28 is running on. So.
Oh, it's not in the King James.
Yeah,
It doesn't exist.
so the verse is from Luke 9, 22 through 27.
But
28 continues to go on, but it should cut off at 27 according to the syllabus.
Okay.
So 28 just needs to be
Okay.
cut off. But
Yeah,
28
that would seem to make sense, but I don't know that the rest of whatever that sentence was might not have had a meaning for it, but it doesn't. So
It says, now it came to pass about 8 days after these sayings that he took Peter, John, and James and went up to the mountain to pray.
Okay. All right. So yeah, just missed a little bit there, which was actually kind of a segue into the next group anyway. So now we're going to read about the Transfiguration in Matthew's, the Matthew, Mark, and Luke passages, and then we're going to break for the day. Somebody could close that door for 2 reasons: the light and also the dog.
Transfiguration.
Yes.
Okay.
Matthew 17, 1 through 13. Someone.
And after 6 days, Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, and bringeth them up into a high mountain apart. And he was transfigured before them, and his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias talking with him. Then answered Peter and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, one for Moses, and one for Elias. While he yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And behold, a voice out of the cloud which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face and were sore afraid. And Jesus came and touched them and said, Arise, and be not afraid. And when they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no man. Save Jesus only. And as they came down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, saying, Tell this version to no man.
No, wait, back up. Start with tell and say that sentence properly.
Television.
What is that at?
Television. No man tell the sound.
Yeah.
Tell the vision to no man, till the Son of Man be risen again from the dead. And the disciples asked him, saying, Why then say the scribes that Elias must first come? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Elias surely shall first come and restore all things. But I say unto you, that Elias is come already, and they knew him not, but have done unto him whatsoever they listed. Likewise shall also the Son of Man suffer of them. Then the disciples understood that he spake unto them of John the Baptist.
Okay, and then the Mark passage.
Lord, after 6 days, Jesus spake with him, Peter and James and John, and he gave them up into the high mountain apart by themselves, and he was transfigured before them, and his raiment became shining exceeding well as snow, white as snow. So as no fuller on earth can white them, and there came unto them Elias with Moses, and they were thinking with Jesus. And Peter answered and said to Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here, and let us make there tabernacle?
Yes.
One for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elias. Yeah. For thou waste not what to say, for thee were sore afraid. And there was a cloud that overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my beloved Son, hear him. And suddenly when they had looked around about, they saw no man any more, save Jesus only with themselves. And as they came down from the mountain, he charged them, changed them, and that.
Charged them.
They should tell no man what things they had seen till the Son of Man were risen from the dead. And they kept that saying with themselves, and questioning one with another, that the risen from the dead should mean. And they asked him, saying, Why say the
scribes, yes.
Scribes that Elias must first come? And answered and told him, Elias verified cometh first, and restoreth all things, and how it is written of the Son of Man, that he must suffer many things, and be set at not. But I say unto you that Elias is indeed come, and they have done unto him, and whatsoever they listed as it is written of him.
Okay, just for a second, that word listeth, you know, when a boat kind of drifts away from its moorings, or if you don't moor it, it'll drift away. That's called listing. I don't know. Anybody ever heard of a cartoon called Funky Winkerbean? No. It's kind of old school. I'll bring that in. So if I can find it, I'll bring that in sometime and let you see if you can figure it out. It's pretty funny. It took me. I read it. I looked at it. And I'm like, I couldn't figure it out. About 2 o'clock in the morning, it hit me, and I sound asleep, but it hit me. And I woke up busting out laughing. And it has something to do with that word. Anyway, and you won't remember that when I bring the cartoon in. So, somebody else read Luke 9:28 through 36, please.
ESV.
Okay.
About 8 days after these sayings, he took with him Peter and John and James, and went up on the mountain to pray. And as he was praying, the appearance of his face was altered, and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, 2 men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and those who were with him were heavy with sleep, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory, and the 2 men stood with him. And as the men were parted from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Not knowing what he said. As he was saying these things, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were afraid, and they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud, saying, This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him. And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. And they kept silent and told no one in those days anything of what they had seen.
Yeah, and try, it's not hard to imagine. It's not at all hard to imagine, and we're done for as far as those passages are concerned, but we're still going to talk a few minutes more, a minute more. In those days, Jesus was this man who walked the earth, and they continued to not fully grasp that he's God incarnate, And so they kept thinking of it as a man. So it was not really all that unusual for Peter to really think, oh, hey, you're as good as these other two guys. Well, those other two guys wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Jesus and, and all that other stuff. But I want to just talk for one more second. Is there anybody in here that's old enough to remember the phrase Fuller Rush Man?
Fuller Rush Man?
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
Let's see if Ken was here. He'd probably remember that. Anyway, that was door-to-door salesman, and they sold cleaning products and all that sort of stuff. And the name of the company was Fuller. Okay, so when you see the word Fuller in here, we're talking about something Fuller being somebody who cleans things and makes them white, specifically white. I worked for a Fuller Brush Man for a little bit for 50 cents delivered 500 circulars to houses. Yes, sir.
That's what Johnny Cash did,
huh?
Johnny Cash?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. He's certainly he's in my age bracket. But yeah. So when you see the word Fuller, it just means cleaning something, usually something that can be cleaned until it's really, really white. So that then does conclude our lessons for today. I thank you for your attention to it, and I do expect to be here next week. So if someone would close us out in prayer, we can depart hence.